On the morning of August 5, 2025, the skies above Ukraine did not simply darken, they trembled. In a single instant, the horizon lit up with the roar of engines and the world tilted toward catastrophe. From the north, the rumble of Russian armored divisions shook the ground, while from the south, the whine of Chinese jet engines split the dawn air. Tanks rolled forward like steel predators, their tracks grinding the earth, as waves of Chinese warplanes streaked across the Black Sea, descending with precision toward Ukrainian soil. The assault was supposed to be flawless, a two-pronged strike designed to shatter Ukraine before its defenders could even breathe. It had been planned in silence, timed to the second, coordinated with ruthless efficiency. Yet what followed was not conquest but chaos. At the very tip of Russia's spearhead, massive mine-clearing vehicles belched smoke and flame, their task to carve a safe path through what they believed was a wall of buried explosives. But the real danger was not underground, it was alive. It was mobile, and it was waiting, from the shadows of irrigation ditches and from beneath the cover of overgrown tree lines. Small tracked machines burst into motion. These were not mines, they were remote tech-controlled anti-tank robots, mechanical hunters designed to think and move. The first one lunged at the lead T-90M battle tank. A deafening explosion ripped the vehicle apart, its heavy turret torn loose, and flung skyward like a child's toy before crashing into a wheat field hundreds of meters away. On the southern coast, disaster struck just as quickly. Chinese amphibious landing craft, their decks packed with naval infantry, burst into fireballs before their ramps even touched the sand. Ukrainian coastal batteries, hidden under camouflage and firing with mathematical precision, turned the sea into a graveyard. Men screamed as fuel ignited, turning steel holes into furnaces. Within minutes, Russia and China the hunters had become prey. Smoke rolled across the battlefield. Shattered squads tried desperately to regroup, only to be cut down by sniper fire and long-range artillery hidden on the ridges. A young Chinese Marine, no older than 20, stumbled bleeding from the surf, only to be annihilated by a mortar shell seconds later. From the wheat fields and tree lines, Ukrainian gunners fired with chilling accuracy. Every movement the invaders made was punished instantly. There was no regrouping, no fallback, no chance for second strikes. The trap had been sprung and the invaders were bleeding out inside it. Beneath the thunder of artillery and the roar of firestorms, there was silence, the dreadful silence that only follows hundreds of sudden deaths. The question echoed like a whisper: what had gone so wrong? Why had the world's two great armies fallen into ruin within minutes? The answer began hours earlier. At 5:42 a.m., August 5th, alarms screamed inside Ukraine's southern and eastern command posts. From the radar bunkers outside Kharkiv to the observation towers overlooking Odessa, every screen told the same story. Two forces, one from the sea and one from the land, converging with surgical precision toward Ukraine's heart. From the Black Sea, a Chinese strike group split formation. In the gray half-light of dawn, 10 advanced J-15 fighter jets roared skyward, their afterburners trailing rivers of orange fire. Seconds later, 5 Y-9G electronic warfare planes joined them, vomiting walls of jamming signals meant to blind Ukrainian radar. Behind them surged amphibious assault ships, each carrying 300 naval infantry armed for a beachhead assault. From the north, Russia advanced like a tidal wave of steel. 20-77 mine-clearing vehicles roared forward, detonating controlled blasts to open paths through kill zones. 50 T-9 ODM tanks followed, their massive 125mm guns already elevated toward distant horizons. Behind them rolled armored personnel, carriers stuffed with 500 Wagner mercenaries, while overhead, Su-20 for suppression aircraft scoured the skies for Ukrainian defenses. High above them, 10 Su-30 for bombers armed with half-ton bunker-busting bombs circled into attack formation. Together, the Russian and Chinese forces represented more than $1.2 billion worth of war machines and an overwhelming number of soldiers, airmen, and Marines. Their goal was not simply conquest, it was annihilation. They aimed to strike to Ukrainian strongholds, choke the supply lines, and fracture the nation's defenses. On paper, it was a decapitation strike that no army could withstand, but Ukraine had been watching 9 hours earlier, long before the first tank moved or the first jet took off. The trap was already being set. High above the clouds, two American-made MQ-9B Guardian drones prowled silently over Mykolaiv and Sumy. Their synthetic aperture radars painted a chilling picture. Russian armor massing in the north, Chinese fleets breaking toward the coast. By 10:15 p.m. on August 4th, Ukraine's general staff had convened a crisis cell. They knew what was coming, but instead of meeting fire with fire, they chose something different. They would invite the enemy forward. Orders went out in silence, radar stations in the targeted corridors powered down, giving the illusion of blindness. Artillery units melted away under cover of night. Special forces teams disappeared into culverts, irrigation trenches, and abandoned farmhouses to the enemy. The corridors looked weak, exposed, undefended. In truth, they had become a killing ground. At the heart of this trap lay a weapon the invaders had never encountered. 50 mobile anti-tank mine robots, each one no larger than a toolbox on tracks, each armed with a 12 kilograms shaped charge capable of punching through 750 millimeters of modern armor. At 5:53 a.m., when the Russian spearhead entered the undefended zone, the U-77 mine-clearing vehicles found nothing, no mines, no traps. Just empty fields. That was the point. Hidden in drainage ditches and tree lines, the robots waited. And when the tanks rolled past, they struck. The invasion had just turned into an ambush. The moment the T-90M tanks pushed into the freshly cleared lanes, the Ukrainian robots surged forward with ruthless precision. One of the machines slammed directly into the lead tank's left track. The blast tore the massive turret from its mount, hurling it nearly 50 feet into the air before it crashed back to Earth with a thunderous roar. Behind the wreck, two more tanks swerved violently in an attempt to avoid the flaming carcass. Ahead, instead, in the chaos, they collided, grinding to a halt in twisted steel and confusion. Meanwhile, far to the south along the Black Sea coast, Chinese landing craft were closing the distance, only 5 nautical miles from shore. They had no idea that above them, loitering munitions had already locked onto their heat signatures. The jaws of the trap were closing, and yet both invading forces kept charging forward, straight into annihilation. So what do you think of this Ukrainian trap? Support us by liking and subscribing, and now, join me as we witness the trap unfold in real time. At 5:58 a.m., just 5 minutes after the first T-90M exploded under the charge of a mobile mine robot, the air above the battlefield shifted. From beyond the ridgeline north of Sumy, the muffled thump of hydraulic recoil systems shattered the morning stillness. 12 to S2 to Bodana self-propelled howitzers opened fire in perfect unison. Their GPS-guided shells, accurate to within less than 2 meters, began detonating above the Russian armored column at calculated airburst heights. Tungsten fragments shredded infantry even before they could dismount. Within the first 90 seconds, the opening salvo had immobilized or set ablaze the first 14 Russian vehicles in the column. One ammunition carrier was struck squarely, erupting into a massive chain reaction of secondary explosions, each blast brighter and louder than the last. The shockwave ripped through the valley, rattling windows in villages already evacuated. The night before, at the same time, over the Black Sea coast near Odessa, the trap for the Chinese amphibious force ignited. From camouflaged revetments inland, 8 TB to Bayraktar drones and 6 Warmate loitering munitions launched together in a perfectly coordinated strike. Traveling at over 90 knots, they dove straight onto the lead landing craft and troop-filled hovercraft. The first hit tore open the bow ramp of a Type 726 air cushion vessel, spilling armored vehicles into the surf like discarded toys. Seconds later, another drone smashed directly into a troop carrier, killing 47 Chinese Marines before they even set foot on Ukrainian soil. From hidden tree lines along the northern corridor, Ukraine's rotary cannon batteries came. Alive, the Shvel-6, a 6-barrel anti-aircraft gun capable of unleashing 4,000 rounds per minute, swept the skies clean of incoming Russian and Chinese UAVs. In just over 3 minutes, 31 enemy drones were reduced to falling debris, some detonating mid-air, others spiraling helplessly into empty fields as their guidance systems failed under relentless jamming. But the most devastating blow came from the layered kill zones Ukraine had prepared the night before. As the Russian armored column attempted to maneuver around the burning wrecks ahead, they unknowingly rolled straight into a secondary mine belt buried beneath shallow layers of soil. The results were catastrophic. In less than 4 minutes, 99 OM tanks and 6 BMP infantry fighting vehicles were obliterated by sequential detonations. Their crews were either killed instantly or forced to abandon their vehicles, scrambling desperately across open ground, only to be torn apart by continuous artillery fire. The chaos was total. Russian mercenaries, desperate to regroup behind the ruins of a collapsed barn, were cut down by precision mortar fire, each shot guided by quadcopter drones hovering unseen above them. On the coast, the surviving Chinese Marines abandoned their burning landing craft, attempting to wade ashore under the cover of thick smoke grenades. But waiting in elevated dunes were Ukrainian snipers who had been lying in wait for hours. Their first volleys cut down dozens before the Chinese could even form a defensive line. By 6:09 a.m., both invading spearheads, the Russians from the north and the Chinese from the sea, were bleeding men, armor, and momentum. Neither had reached their objectives, and yet, Ukraine's full counterattack had not even begun. The invaders were still inside the kill box, and the jaws were about to close tighter. By 6:10 a.m., the battlefield had transformed into a living inferno. Walls of smoke and fire twisted skyward, black and orange mixing into a hellish backdrop. For Ukrainian commanders, this was not the signal to hold the line, it was the moment to close it. The plan had been months in the making. The moment the enemy stalled inside the kill zone, Ukraine's noose would tighten from 4 sides at once. From the west of the Sumy corridor, 32 T-8 for Oplet main battle tanks roared forward at 45 miles per hour, their ceramic armor glinting through the haze. Each one fired high-explosive anti-tank rounds that punched through Russian armor as though it were paper. In just the first 90 seconds, 7 more T-9OMs were annihilated. One round even pierced clean through a BMP troop carrier, igniting its fuel tank and killing the squad inside before the burning wreck rolled to a stop. On their flanks, mobile anti-aircraft platforms opened up, spitting streams of 30mm shells skyward. The last surviving Chinese reconnaissance drones, 14 in total, were shredded in under 2 minutes, their wreckage raining back down upon their own landing zones. From the east, Ukraine's 93rd Mechanized Brigade surged out of concealed positions hidden in irrigation ditches and tree lines. They advanced under the protection of a curtain of suppressive fire from 122mm Grad rocket batteries. Each ripple of launches saturated entire grid squares, not fired randomly, but aimed directly at choke points where retreating enemies would be forced to flee. Meanwhile, far down on the southern coast, the elaborate trap prepared for the Chinese Marines was sprung in full. Ukrainian special forces who had infiltrated shoreline bunkers and concealed positions under cover of pre-dawn darkness now emerged like ghosts from the sand and shattered concrete. Each man carried man-portable anti-tank weapons in LAWs and American-made javelin launchers cradled and ready. The still morning air cracked with fire as they unleashed their payloads. In barely 5 minutes of sustained strikes, 6 additional landing craft were obliterated. 3 were gutted by direct hits to their engines, their hulks grinding to a halt before sinking in the shallow surf. 2 more detonated violently from within, their warheads piercing straight into troop compartments packed with Marines. Screams and shouts were silenced in an instant. The last went up in a cataclysmic fireball when a missile ruptured its fuel tanks, sending a towering plume of flame skyward, a beacon of destruction visible nearly 7 miles out to sea. The once orderly shoreline now resembled a graveyard of twisted steel. The beach was littered with discarded rifles, overturned amphibious vehicles, and charred equipment. Smoke curled from machines still smoldering where they had been struck. The Chinese assault force had been caught in a steel-jawed ambush, then came the killing stroke. The surviving vehicles, desperate to escape, began reversing out of the kill zone. Ukrainian forces funneled them, deliberately hurting their retreat, toward what looked like an inviting open road. Yet this road was no sanctuary. It had been meticulously prepared, seeded with anti-tank mines buried in precise intervals of 2 meters. The first explosion ripped through the lead tank, tearing its tracks away and leaving the machine crippled, a smoking barricade blocking the path. A second blast erupted beneath an armored personnel carrier loaded with 9 mercenaries. The detonation incinerated them where they sat, the vehicle blown apart in a rain of shrapnel. Within 3 minutes, the entire route was jammed with burning wrecks. Survivors were trapped in an ever-tightening cage of fire and twisted steel. High above, Ukrainian drone operators observed the chaos unfold in real time, their monitors filling with red markers that bloomed across the map. Every moving target, every cluster of troops, every desperate retreat was logged and relayed to hidden mortar teams stationed in farmyards, haylofts, and abandoned barns scattered across the countryside. The counter-barrage fell with ruthless precision, striking infantry groups before they could reorganize, cutting down men who tried to scramble into cover. By 6:22 a.m., the grand Russian-Chinese assault was no longer an attack. It was a rout, but escape was impossible. The battlefield itself had become a steel cage, and Ukraine alone held the keys. By 6:25 a.m., the clash was no longer a contest, it was a collapse in the north. The Russian armored spearhead had already been annihilated. Columns of oily black smoke clawed into the sky from every one of the 50 T-9OM tanks that had dared roll into the ambush zone. Of the 500 elite mercenaries who had ridden in on armored carriers, fewer than 90 remained combat-capable, and those were pinned, cut off, and nearly out of ammunition. On the southern coast, the Chinese landing force fared no better. The sea itself had turned into a floating scrapyard, littered with the charred skeletons of 9 shattered landing craft. Of the original 300 naval infantry who had stormed ashore, more than 200 were now dead or missing. The survivors huddled in shallow depressions behind crumbling seawalls, pinned under the merciless gaze of Ukrainian snipers. What had begun as a confident amphibious assault had been reduced to a desperate, fragmented struggle for survival. At precisely 6:27 a.m., the battlefield grew still enough to carry a new sound. Ukrainian loudspeakers crackled to life across both fronts, broadcasting in both Russian and Mandarin, "You are surrounded. Lay down your arms, surrender, and you will be treated under the law."